Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to MetalCon Live. I'm Judy Geller, Director of MetalCon, here with our MetalCon Marketing Manager, Lismani Medina, who's running the show while Kaylin enjoys some time off. If you attended MetalCon in Tampa this past October, you know that we launched a Solar Education Center Pavilion sponsored by S5. That Pavilion explored solar and the opportunities for the metal construction industry to expand, evolve, and profit from the solar boom. Today, we are delighted to welcome Dan Javan, CEO of Suntuity, an authority on all things solar, and to host today's session titled The Growth of Solar and the Emergence of Net Zero Construction. But first, let me remind you to please mark your calendars for the next MetalCon Live on January 5th, when we return after the holidays at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Metal Building Systems 101, presented by Lee Shoemaker, the Director of Research and Engineering at the Metal Building Manufacturers Association. A quick reminder before we start, if you need technical help, please reach out to MetalCon support through the chat box. And also, don't forget to complete the survey after today's webinar so you can earn your AIA learning units for today's session. Before I officially turn the session over to Dan, I'd like to just take a second and wish each and every one of you a happy holiday season and a healthy and prosperous new year on behalf of the entire MetalCon team. And now over to you, Dan.
So thanks for having me on, and MetalCon, thanks for inviting me to participate. Let me start by sharing my screen, just go through some of the logistics setup out here, so just bear with me while I do that. All right, you should be able to see my screen now. Yep, I am screen sharing. All right, so again, the topic is growth of solar and the emergence of net zero home construction. We'll encompass this entire discussion around metal roofing and what that really means for a lot of you that are in the metal roofing industry, from a growth perspective, on an opportunity perspective, from a business perspective, so that we can actually walk out of the session not just with the knowledge base of solar and net zero construction, but in fact, how you can monetize and relate to solar and net zero construction when it comes to metal roofing. Just a little bit of background about myself. So I'm the president and CEO of the Suntuity Group of Companies. We were originally founded in 2008 out of New Jersey. We operate in 8 different countries, 30 different territories across the US, 22 states. We are a top 10 residential solar provider or integrator in the United States today. Growing rapidly, we have a separate home services division that does roofing, window, siding. Haven't quite got into metal roofing construction projects just yet, but we're looking at expanding into metal roofing. But we've leveraged residential solar now along with home services for some time. In addition to that, a lot of what we do encompasses around home services on design and engineering. And recently we've gotten into net zero home construction. It's a buzzword. It's something that has been fairly adequately utilized in Europe. It's just beginning to get utilized in the US right now. And the format of this presentation is obviously getting you the knowledge base that we just talked about, but like I said, how that relates to expanding your business, growing your business, being able to allow you to participate in these different functions, I think is key. And I'd like to spend the first half of this session talking to you about that, and the other half of the session opening it up to questions that you might have, with any kind of intricate details, with again, any kind of follow through that you want, even after the session, make myself available. So just, going through a sequence of events, we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of solar in the US. We'll talk about how metal roofs and solar relate to each other and how they can leverage each other. And then finally, how that relates to net zero home construction. What does net zero home construction even mean? How do you monetize on that? How do you leverage some of the trades that you've actually worked with before to actually benefit not just yourself, but your customers in the process? Moving to the next slide, talking a little bit about Suntuity Solar and Suntuity Home. I did give you a prelude to a little bit about Suntuity Solar. We are top 10 residential solar integrator in the country today. We do have a separate business division that focuses on utility scale solar, on CNI and industrial solar. We've primarily focused on metal roofing on the commercial and industrial space in the past. We've been in the business for almost 12, 13 years now. So we've seen the progression of solar from its nascency to where it's becoming a powerhouse today. And in commensurate to that, Suntuity Home is fairly newer portion of our organization, and we perform services today in 7 to 8 different states with Suntuity Home. That includes roofing, windows, siding, and now, as of last year, home construction. And our focus really has been on net zero home construction. Again, both these companies are subsidiaries and part of the Suntuity group of companies. We're at a high level, 8 different companies within the Suntuity group, including a separate not-for-profit arm of our company, which is Suntuity Foundation. Suntuity Home has been around for about 3+ years, but one of the focuses of Suntuity Home is to actually change traditional home construction from the stick frame construction that it typically used to leveraging more state-of-the-art technology such as insulated concrete forms, or ICF. Some of you may have heard of that, and leveraging hydronic heating systems, leveraging PV thermal systems combined with PV electric systems for energy production and energy conservation within the home. Moving on to the next slide, the benefits of solar. Other than obviously environmental benefits, because you're producing power on site, there's a tremendous amount of financial benefits. Some of you may already be familiar with that. Some of you may not be familiar with that. Penetration of the market, residential solar today in the US is in the single digits. We're in the nascency of the industry. We're finally in industry. We're not as we're not as mature an industry as roofing industry is, but we're beginning to get there. Solar PV has been around for a long time. I mean, it started off with the oil embargoes in the 70s when you had Jimmy Carter out there that was trying to find PV technologies to leverage to actually work around some of the costs of oil to, the last 6 to 7 years, where a combination of state incentives, federal incentives, and other credits have enabled the adoption of solar technologies, right? So obviously the advantages of solar is carbon footprint reduction, because you're producing energy at source. You have some level of resilience in your utility rate offset, because you have utility rates that keep going up between 1.9 to 3.9%, or maybe even more in some markets across the US. So you have some level of control around that. You have access obviously to different tax credits across different state lines, and these tax credit benefits, they've been expanded and they've also been extended, which means this is a good time for you to monetize it. How long will they be around? We don't know. Probably at least for the next 2 years to 3 years, we foresee them sticking around. And then today you have comprehensive financing that's available for solar. If you looked at the solar industry 5 years ago, you wanted a solar system, you pretty much had to pay cash. The next progression in financing around solar was you could get a loan from a bank that was unsecured. Today you have everything from a third-party ownership, which is like a PPA, to a lease program, to a ownership program with a loan, without any kind of securitization of the home required for you to get solar, which means solar is a lot more accessible. It is a lot more adoptable. It is a lot more mainstream, where Wall Street's willing to put money behind it, investors are willing to put money behind it, So it's going to take off. And again, we're in single-digit market penetration rates across the country today. So the only place you go from here is up. So those are some of the high-level benefits of solar. And again, a lot of this has to do with different government mandates. You've got the federal investment tax credit. It's 26% right now. The stocks are making it 30% in the infrastructure bill. You can depreciate it using a maker's depreciation rate that's accelerated over 5 years. In fact, there's been tranches of years where you can depreciate the entire solar system in the first year, which is a tremendous opportunity to leverage tax benefits on that. And then obviously there's a lot of public utility regulations that mandate different states to have adoption of renewables, and specifically solar, for all the discussion topics we had before, right? Whether it's carbon emission footprint reduction, or whether it is offsetting of grid imbalances of resilience and things like that. And when people look at solar, they look at kilowatt hour savings, right? But for the industry, solar is a source of energy. It's a movement of electrons, whether it is from the grid or whether it's from the panels. There are states like California today, and what California does, typically the rest of the country does about 2 years later, where you can leverage the energy produced from your solar and batteries that are attached to the solar, not just for grid autonomy, where the grid goes down, but you can use it for grid services, which means as a homeowner, if you own your system, there are systems coming into place and different programs coming into place where you have the ability of injecting power into the grid for frequency regulation, for demand response, for time of use response. So it's not just a kilowatt hour offset anymore. It has a potential of becoming a profit center for homeowners, for consumers, for businesses, which is why really the attachment storage makes it important, because you can now inject power into the grid anytime of the day or night. There's a whole bunch of supporting agencies around solar adoption in the U.S., including FERC, or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission being one of them. And you're going to see more and more state agencies that are beginning to adopt some of these programs. Moving on to the next slide, it's the different state incentives vary, but the leaders in incentives really, and again, I don't see New Jersey in here, but it should be on this slide. If you look at coast to coast, obviously California has been the leader of the pack. Got started with renewables and solar long before the rest of the country. New Jersey has been a leader, Massachusetts, you now have Arizona, North Carolina, Florida, Texas. Today, Suntuity Solar is in 22 different states in the US, and states that you would not have thought of probably a year ago: Kansas, Missouri, Wisconsin, Montana now. There are incentives rolling through different states that you would not have thought of to actually leverage solar technologies. And why is this so important, right? When you're talking about net zero home construction, the goal is to offset your energy footprint, and production of power on site is a direct offset of your energy footprint, right? Which is really why we're talking about solar and how that relates to net zero home construction. Obviously, metal roofs are a medium for us to deploy solar, but the gist of it is it's solar batteries that give you the ability to go off grid if you want to, or be able to even go net positive when you're generating a lot more power than you actually are consuming, which is a different discussion we can have. So again, why is it so popular? The biggest advantage of solar is not the fact that it gives you some level of autonomy. You can do that with batteries, you can do that with generators. From the economics of it, right? There's a return on investment in solar PV in general, in most states between 4 years to about 11 years, right? If you look at most investments consumers make today, you're looking at on an average 12, 14, 15-year payback. With something like solar, if you have a 3-year payback, with a life expectancy of a system of from 30 or 35 years, it's a no-brainer. So the reason why it's grown so rapidly, and you're seeing some of the numbers in front of you, 2018, $52.5 billion, of solar value, right? 19.2 gigawatts in 2020, 25 gigawatts in 2023. And again, these are just projections that as an industry, we think we will exceed. So from a growth trajectory, it's almost like a hockey stick. It's not a slight curve. It is an exponential rise. Solar companies in general that are doing well are growing between 70 to 80% each year. And that is not a small task or small number, because most of these companies are already 100 million, 200 million, $300 million in size. So if you're growing at those rates, at those volumes, you can imagine the growth opportunity. And a lot of that is driven by, market penetration, like I said, is so small, is green pastures, which really, again, will come towards the end of this discussion into what does that mean for the metal roofing industry? How do you jump onto that train? How do you jump onto that bandwagon? How do you actually monetize the growth of a ancillary product that actually can propel the growth of the metal roofing industry, right? So we'll get into some of these discussions further on. And again, if you have questions, I would suggest you put them in the chat. We'll go through the questions once we go through the presentation and address those questions. And if we need to slide back and forth, we can figure that out. So moving into metal roofs and solar. Again, the image that you're seeing out here is actually one of our demo net zero homes that we constructed in central Jersey this year. This is an angular standing metal seam roof with LG modules on it, with S5 clamps on it. No penetrations. It's a clean look. In fact, you have a lot more attachment points on this roof than you would with a traditional asphalt shingle roof. So from a wind loading perspective, I mean, this in fact doesn't get any better. It's almost like the system is almost fully integrated into the roof system itself, and there's really no penetrations other than any J boxes you might have to actually route, pipe and wire through, right? Which again, you can limit exposure compared to a traditional asphalt shingle roof, where every single attachment point is a penetration in the roof, right? And you can leverage butyl tape, you can leverage sealants and things like that. But the best way to actually prevent any kind of potential leakage is just don't go through the roof, which is why metal roofs actually are a good medium for solar. Even from an aesthetics perspective, typically the aesthetics that you would have on a metal roof structure, if it's done right, is a lot better than on asphalt shingle roof structure. And at the end of the day, when you're looking at the home industry, aesthetics still sell homes, right? Solar sort of does in some states, but not so much. But the biggest advantages are higher roof loading options. You have seamless attachments that basically look fully integrated. And again, you have no penetrations. That's one of the biggest advantages. Another advantage that's not in the slides is, depending on how the combination works, you can now apply for certain types of LEED certification. And of course, for those of you in the metal industry, you know the value of LEED certification, whether it is, whether it's bragging rights or whether it's getting a lower mortgage or a reduced insurance bill because the house has been designed a certain way or the building's been designed a certain way. So these are some of the advantages that we run into with, metal roofs and solar. Obviously, metal roofs, in their nature, they're, most of them are highly reflective. You have a reduction in energy costs in production of metal compared to asphalt. It's a renewable resource, unlike asphalt. It's recyclable. It's lightweight. It can withstand a lot more wind, hail, abuse, basically. And you're not going to change it every 20 years like you would with an asphalt shingle roof, right? Those advantages align itself with a solar PV installation because 30% of solar installations today will require to, depending on the size and the age of the roof they were installed on, remove during their lifetime to have the roof changed, right? With metal, you don't you don't have to worry about that. You install it and you forget it till you're ready to decommission the solar system 30 or 35 years later. And it's not that the system may not work 35 years, the efficiencies drop, but outside of that, it's almost like a shut it and forget it opportunity that you would have to go through. So there's a natural, cohesion, I guess, between metal roofs and solar when it comes to the adaptability of it, which is really why I think there's a lot of opportunity. And today, the industry hasn't really promoted solar with metal, because everyone's taking the easy way out, which is we'll go to asphalt shingle because 95 or more percentage of the market today has asphalt shingle roofs. But long term, as you get more and more into newer construction methodologies, you get into net zero construction, and you get into different long-term investments that consumers are looking at making, because of course metal is a lot more long-term investment than the asphalt shingle is, it becomes more and more of an integral part of a solar solution. And even from a financeability perspective, right? So metal typically is a lot more expensive to deploy than asphalt. But when you marry metal roofs with the economics of solar, it actually will discount itself drastically, where you can now go into markets where you just could not afford to deploy a metal roof because of economics around it. But you marry that with solar, and all of a sudden, the metal roof becomes a no-brainer, right? And of course, you have resilience for 50 years in the roof, or 100 years, depending on the type of roof that you have. So that is a natural symbiotic relationship I think metal roofs and solar have. That is something that we should not ignore. Leveraging solar for profit, right? Which is really what has led to both the widespread adoption of solar, but also, with the scale of adoption, it's a completely new revenue stream, right? And it's not just kilowatt hour offset. States like New Jersey, for example, give you green tax, or T-RECs that they call now. At $90 a T-REC for every megawatt hour that you produce of energy. A traditional home will generate about $1,100 in additional income. You go to states like, or you go to Washington, D.C., where the SRECs are $400, right? Typical 10 kilowatt system will give you a revenue generation of about $4,500 to $5,000 plus save you the energy, right? You can take this money and go and invest it. You can take this, go on a vacation. You can take this and put it into the metal roof, or you can roll this all into the loan, including the metal roof, and your monthly payment is still going to be less than what it cost you for just, for getting a metal roof, right? So the advantage, obviously, that you have, in the roofing industry, in the metal roofing industry, is you're already in front of consumers. The fact that they're looking at leveraging metal, especially on the consumer side, and the CNI is slightly different, there's more of a need to have. On the consumer side, it's more of a like to have, is they're more energy conscious, they're more quality conscious, they're more renewable conscious. So now you already have a stream of potential opportunities that you marry to something like a solar profit center, and you actually tie them into the same bucket for a loan program that's monetized over 20 years, where the solar either discounts or even pays for the metal roof monthly payment. And you now can have a go-to-market strategy that is very different, that opens up probably another 10, 20% of your consumer base that you didn't have before. And for a lot of you, 10 or 20% could be doubling your opportunity, or maybe even tripling it, depending on the kind of market you are in. So when you start thinking of that, and I said earlier in this presentation, the goal for me is to see how this relates to you as a business owner, or as a adopter of metal roofs, or someone that can integrate and implement metal roofs. It's really the monetization of how solar can be leveraged with metal roofs. So that's something to think about. And like I said, we'll have follow-ups to this. And if you have questions, I'm happy to share contact information. We can talk in more detail about it. Moving on to the next slide, it's savings, financing, and incentives, which is, I already got into this discussion around it. Obviously, with solar PV, you're saving money. The financing is key to making all this work, with incentives to support the financing and, of course, the savings that you get. And you tie that metal roof cost into it. And now you basically walk out of the equation where, your roof either got discounted 100%, 80%, 50%, or something to that effect, which frankly you never had before. You have the opportunity now. And we haven't moved into, obviously, LEED certification, net zero home construction, and we'll get into the slides as we move along. But that becomes another avenue where it's where the younger generation, the newer generation want to make or affect change in the way they live their lives to how they relate to the environment, right? So all these things, when you start putting these things together, financial benefit, aesthetic benefit, safety benefit, autonomy benefit, and obviously something that's good for the planet, and you benefit financially for it, it becomes an extremely strong driving force that I think the metal roofing industry can benefit from, that that it hasn't yet quite done at any level of scale. So moving on to our next slide, net zero construction. So what's net zero construction? Again, this is one of our net zero homes in Middlesex County in Central Jersey, with a metal roof on it, with S5 snow guards on that. So just quick shout out from S5 and Engelert for this. So net zero is basically obviously having a footprint that's zero, right? And how do you do that? Again, if you use renewable sources like gas, or you use any kind of fuel-based sources, it sort of negates net zero construction. But any kind of construction that, both from a short-term and long-term energy perspective, if you don't have to depend on any kind of fossil fuels and you rely on renewable energy sources, would qualify for net zero. And of course, then there's net positive. So when you look at places like Europe, or places in Europe, where they're already looking at net positive home construction, where the homes are generating more energy than they're actually consuming, and injecting that extra energy into the grid, or storing that in batteries for autonomy. There's a lot of different benefits that come to play, not just from an environmental perspective, right? It comes down to, and also not just from an autonomy perspective, you now get into the discussion from microgrids, where every home is a source of power generation. Every business can be a source of power generation for all the businesses and homes around it. So if the grid ever goes down, or if the grid is ever attacked, and it's a matter of time before that happens, and we've been through grid outages before, not only do you stay operational, the grid around you stays operational, right? And if you have enough microgrids established, it gives you, at that point, it's a matter of national security, right? And as a country, as organizations in this country, that's something that we should be cognizant of. And as consumers, we need to be cognizant of that too. So anytime you get into the driver's seat, where you control the narrative of energy production, not just for your home, but also people around you, it's extremely beneficial. So that's one of the biggest leading factors for net zero home construction adoption across the world. Start off in Europe, moving into Australia, the US, and now eventually, I think there's small pockets of it in Southeast Asia. The total number of homes delivered so far, from the numbers that have been shared with me, that are certified net zero across the US, is a little under 9,000. Right? We suspect there's probably about 25,000 homes right now. And again, this is homes that really have no dependence on any kind of external fossil fuel sources. But these numbers are growing rapidly, right? We expect legislation to come into play at a federal level, at a state level, where it's going to mandate net zero home construction in all new communities. It's going to mandate eventually net positive home construction, where you now have microgrids being leveraged, right? So this is a natural progression that you're going to see in the country. You're going to see this in the industry. So why not get ahead of the curve, right? Why not start participating on that? And of course, metal roofs are a huge benefit to net zero home construction for all the reasons we just talked about, including recyclability and things like that. So that's just a little bit about net zero home construction. It's talking a little bit about LEED certification earlier, right? So there's a lot of advantages, obviously, with LEED certification. It's not just bragging rights. There's different economics tied to it. yes, there's different cost factors that go into LEED certification, but all of you in the metal roofing industry, or most of you are, I'm sure, fairly familiar with it, because in the past has been one way of promoting metal roofs because it benefits towards getting LEED certification points, and whether it's gold or platinum or any Energy Star certification. That's really happening more and more across the board, where new home construction might have a requirement of certain types of Energy Star compliance or LEED certification requirements, both at a federal level and at a state level. And that's really one of the biggest advantages that metal roofs bring to the table around LEED certification. Obviously, you have reflectivity indexes that you look at when it comes to metal roofs and things like that, based on color choices, and of course, all these things add to the energy footprint of the home, which most people don't think about on the asphalt shingle side, right? People look at it on the TPO side, right? When you want a white roof at the TPO for reflectivity and things like that. So on the flip side, metal roofs do the same exact thing, but they do it longer term than most of the roofing types that are out there, right? So, so that's really the role that metal roofs play in LEED certification and Energy Star certification. Getting towards the end of this presentation, the goal is the first half of this, hour was to talk a little bit about, the knowledge base, right? The second half of this, of course, is to answer any kind of questions you have, but really, how does this relate to, what's in this for you, right, in the metal roofing industry? How does it benefit you as an integrator, as an installer, as a manufacturer, right? Just as a segue, and again, I know this is more commercial that they put in there for me to share with you guys, we have an affiliate partner program, right? It's in the roofing industry, and for the roofing industry, we've got online portals where you can go and put in leads and you can get referrals out of it. But the important thing is for you to leverage solar integration as a way to enable metal roofs, as a way to expand on net zero home construction, and vice versa, right? All three of them are symbiotic. So we can share the information with you. If you're interested, you can send us, you can request this information. This information can share with you. It'll be in the recording after this that you can see. But the important thing is there's a way for you to monetize everything from a lead to an actual sale, both short-term and long-term, right? And you could do it at scale. You could do it in multiple states, because out of at least 50% of the states that we're in today, the economics of solar will discount metal roofs by at least 30%, maybe more. And there are some states that could discount it 100%, like Washington, D.C., not a state, but territory where you can actually, because the SRECs, monetize almost 100% the cost of a metal roof with the solar installation, which is extremely powerful. You roll that into the cost. You're beginning to see a lot of that happen with the asphalt shingle roofs now across the board, but there's absolutely no reason why you can't do that in the metal roofing industry. So again, so the Suntuity affiliate partner program, we can share information with you guys for you to see if that's something that interests you. But these are just some of the key areas that I think as a takeaway from this, you should ask yourself, well, how do I monetize it? What does this presentation mean for me? What does that knowledge base do for me? How do I actually get into this, not just the affiliate program, but how do I get into the solar program? How do I get into net zero home construction, right? For me to be able to monetize, metal roofs and things like that. These are just some of the ways I'm doing it. So that being said, we're down to the actual slides. What I'd like to do is open this up now to any kind of questions that you guys have. I see there's a couple of questions that have already come up. I'd like to answer any kind of questions. I mean, it can range everything from technical to financial, and we can get into that. So the final question that come up is, can I roll the cost of the metal roof into the financing for solar, and how can I roll the metal roof cost into federal or state tax credits? That's a good question. So your answer is yes. You can roll the cost. There's different loan programs that we offer today for the solar side, where you can roll the cost of the metal roof into it. Now, the second half of your question is, how do I monetize that for the federal tax credits, right? So there are certain programs and certain types of roofs where it comes to reflectivity of the roof, where you're leveraging certain types of panels, such as bifacial panels, that will allow you to qualify the whole structure that was pertaining to the generation of power towards a federal tax credit. So let's assume you've got a white TPO roof, which you do on the soft roofing side, but if you had a metal roof right now, and it was a reflective roof with bifacial products, depending on which program you're going for, you should be able to monetize portion of that for the ITC. But at the end of the day, of course, you've got to look at specific roof types, specific solar panel type, and make sure that it is a necessary function of the solar PV to have a certain type of roof that you're looking at pushing for to qualify for the federal tax credits. Another question is, have you come up with any attachments or issues with attachments to a stone coat metal roof? I'll be honest, I don't know what a stone coat metal roof is, but I will take that back. And if you want to put your email address in there, we can come back to you with an answer for that. And I'm sure there's people from S5 that would be happy to talk to you about coming up with new ways of attachment points, but I don't have an answer for you right off the bat. Can you talk about how PV systems are disposed of after their life cycle is over? So most of PV is actually recycled, just like you have electronics that can recycle. Right? There's silver in there, there's gold in there, there's glass in there, there's aluminum in there, and it's silicon. Most of what is used in the US, most of what's used in the world today is silicon-based PV. Yes, you have certain things like First Solar that have cadmium telluride and a different combination of, exotic metals that are exotic components that are used. But so silicon is inert. Silicon is basically sand, glass, right? It's just a different way of deriving it. So almost 99.9% of a solar PV module is recyclable. And in fact, so we are fairly early in the life cycle of solar PV. I mean, most PV modules have a life cycle of 20 or 25 years or 30 years, depending on the type of modules you leverage. But we're getting to a point where the older technology is getting recycled to emerging markets, which means there are panels that are coming off rooftops right now that are about 15 years old that still have another 10 years of life expectancy. And they're getting exported to countries in Africa, Haiti, for philanthropic reasons, where they have another 10 years of usability in there. So they're just getting redeployed. Now, what happens after that, right? They will get recycled. Almost all the components in there are recyclable. So that just adds to the net zero value, where just like the metal roof, 100% recyclable or 99.9%, you have the same thing on the PV side. Another question, if I get into selling solar, do I need to have my team learn to install solar, or is it better for me to partner with a solar company? So I would say both, right? If you're a business owner, you want to look at a short-term and long-term approach. The short-term is start generating leads. I mean, we have an affiliate portal and an affiliate link that you can come in, start generating leads while you learn about the solar industry, right? And as you learn about the solar industry, there's absolutely no reason why you can't start installing the solar components along with your metal roof, right? There's no reason why you can't put an S5 clamp on a certain distance on a layout and plans that have been given to you and prep the roof for the PV to get installed, right? Certain states have restrictions on only electricians that can touch PV and things like that, but there are states today that don't have that, which means you can take that one step further, right? So if that's something that interests you, Suntuity has a program for the roofing industry where we not just let you generate leads, we can teach you about solar, we can teach you how to install solar, and we can even give you work to install solar, right? Rooftop solar. And the electricians just come in behind you and take care of all the tie-ins and the electrical components. So you don't have to get into stuff that you're not comfortable with, but fully deploy what you are comfortable with. So can installing solar result in damage to the standing seam roof I've installed? So the answer, it depends, right? If you've been properly trained and you use the right component, absolutely not, right? There's specific attachment points designed for the standing seam that you have. It's not, yes, you do have universal attachment points, but if you look at the S5 website, for example, there's specific components with different groove sizes and profiles that have been designed for specific standing seam roof types. And it's important because it's not just damage. Today, you will have roofing manufacturers that will actually warranty a roof with a certain type of attachment point. So it's important for you to use the right type of attachment point for the right type of standing seam, so the warranty stays intact. And these are fully warranted from roofing companies when you actually use the right components for the right application of the component. So there should be no damage if you've been trained on what to do. And it is actually a lot simpler than it sounds. For those of you that may not have done it, it sounds complicated, but it's not. So I would suggest you go to the S5 website, you do some research, or if that's something that interests you, send us an email and we'll come back and send you some information around it. But there's absolutely no reason why there should be any damage. Another question is, which is better for, this is good. I mean, a lot of questions, which means there's a lot of participation, which is exactly what this session should be about, where it's getting you guys the information you need to make decisions on direction going forward, because that's what's going to lead to growth in the industry. Which is better for a large industrial roof to have, green roof or solar constrained net zero structure? I would say both, right? There's absolutely no reason why you can't have a combination. But a green roof is not practical on 100% roof layout. You'll always have caveats and parameters around it. Awnings, for example, right? You can have solar PV on a metal roof awning that is an ancillary product to a green roof. And that's just one example. So there's absolutely no reason why you can't have that. And you can still have a green roof with, and you can have solar on it on some kind of gazebo with a, bifacial panel that actually allows light to pass through. Of course, at that point, the metal roof's not going to be in there, but there's absolutely no reason why you can't use a combination of these products to actually increase both your LEED certification points and then help monetize the cost of the green roof, because there's a cost associated with it. How will solar panels hold up in hurricane high wind conditions? So if you remember during the presentation, I discussed the attachment points, right? You can actually get, a rating all the way up to the highest rating of the module, where, and I've seen this firsthand, right? So we've got operations in the Caribbean where if you have a hurricane that comes through, the module frame is still intact with the metal roof, but the glass flew out in the hurricane. So just think a little bit about that, right? A lot of that had to do with the pressure, right? So with the wind speeds and the pressure gradient so high, the frame actually did not budge and stayed on the roof, but the glass actually bent to a point where the glass in the EVA backsheet actually flew off the roof in the hurricane. Now there's specially designed modules that you get today, panels that you get, that will actually withstand, 180 mile per hour winds. In fact, if you go to Florida, you go to Dade County, you go to most of the Caribbean now, the minimum wind rating requirements of the modules are 185 miles per hour. So that will actually stay intact. So in fact, metal roofing attachments, I feel at some level can be even more resilient depending on how many you use and how many you integrate into the standing seam to actually stay intact. So if your standing seam roof stays intact, your modules are going to stay on it. And if it goes in, it's all going together. So how much has solar come down in price and how much do you expect it to come down moving forward? So solar PV costs have dropped consistently over the last 5 years. If you looked at solar PV costs 5 years ago to where it is today, I'd say it's seen almost a 40% to 45% drop. We're now on the flip side of it. So costs are actually going up now. So costs are going up for various reasons. Of course, one is demand and supply. The demand for solar PV has gone through the roof globally, not just in the US, right? China, India, these countries pretty much are gobbling up about 60% of solar PV manufactured in the world today. The US is actually far behind when it comes to the capacity these countries are deploying. But in addition to that, you now have chip shortages, right? So it's not just the solar PV itself, it's the inverters that go with it, it's the electrical components that go with it. So we've in fact seen a price increase, just like everything else has, over the last 5 or 6 months. We expect the price increase to last probably another 6 to 9 months, where after that we think it's going to stabilize. What's going to happen is the cost of acquisition is where we see the price is going to drop, because the components don't have a lot more play. I mean, you have maybe about 10% play in the pricing of components, maybe another 5 or 10% of the cost of labor. The customer acquisition cost today is almost 30 to 35% of the equation. We expect that to drop from 30 or 35% down to about 10% over the next 2 years. And it happened in the cable industry, it happened in the cellular industry, It's happening in the solar industry. Once that happens, you're going to see that cost go down. Our forecast is by, probably in the next 18 months, we'll be less than $2 a watt on residential PV. If you look at utility scale PV globally at scale, most countries are deploying utility scale solar today at 60 cents a watt, all in, deliver components, install, labor, profit. So you can think about it, of course, utility and residential scale are two different, or small C&I is different, but it just gives you an understanding of progression over time. So how much does the average homeowner save in energy costs after installing solar? And so that answer is relative to the state you're in and the utility you're in, right? So if you're in a state like New Jersey, a 10 kilowatt system at 19 cents a kilowatt hour, if you're in PSCNG territory, for example, you're going to produce about 11 megawatt hours a year. You're going to save, a decent amount of money doing that. But now you add the T-Rex to the mix, right? So you're saving 19 cents a kilowatt hour with $2,000 a year in energy, but that cost of energy goes up each year. So as the cost of energy goes up, you save even more. Now you add the T-Rex income to that, right? T-Rex at $90 a piece, which is about 9 cents a kilowatt hour. That's another $1,000. But you take the same thing now, and you move to, Massachusetts, for example, and if you have a $200 SREC, and you have 28 cents per kilowatt hour cost of power, 24 cents, that same 10 kilowatt system is now going to save a consumer out there probably about $2,700 in energy in year one. That increases each year, plus a $200 SREX, that's another roughly $2,200, right? That's a huge savings. So when you take a loan that's a 20-year loan, you're cash flow positive from day one. And the solar savings and income actually not only just pay the loan, actually leaves you with residual income, which is why if you had a metal roof added to that mix, depending on the state you're in, it now can discount the price of the metal roof, right? That's one of the biggest advantages. So if I install solar, do I need to get involved in the engineering of the system? No, you don't, right? So a part of our affiliate program is if you're bringing a lead in, we do the full engineering. If you want to install, we have a fairly large engineering team. But it's not just us, right? If you partner with an integrator, that's close to you, there's absolutely no reason why they should not design and engineer the full system, including the metal roof, right? So whether you're using technology from EagleView or some of the other, technologies out there, you can get a full engineering package for the roof and the solar built into the cost of the solar, right? Which now discounts what you need to do on the metal side. So again, this would obviously be in partnership with different manufacturers, but we do that, or the Suntuity group does that. And yes, we are probably about 6 months to a year ahead of most of where the country is today, but there's absolutely no reason why that should not be doable. Another question is, so Chris, are you aware of there being any warranty issues with the existing building when you add solar materials on the surface? No. So if you recall earlier in the discussion, I talked about a certain profile of attachment that's used to ensure that is in compliance with the manufacturer's recommendations for the standing seam. So if you looked at Engelert, for example, as one of the manufacturers, they tied up with S5, right? So if you've got an A standing seam type or you've got an 1100 standing seam type, there's a certain profile that's in play on the S5 side that will actually conform to the manufacturer recommendations and requirements for warranty resilience through the life of the roof. So as long as you perform and conform to those parameters, you're fine. What is the average solar warranty? So module performance warranties are as high as 25 years today, right? So when you start looking at longevity, right, you go buy an HVAC, equipment in 10 years, right? I mean, there aren't many products out there that can give you a 25-year output warranty. 25-year output warranty standard in the solar industry right now on the module manufacturers. In fact, some of them are going even higher, 30 years, and some of them even more than that. So when you're looking at a long-term product like metal roofs, and you're tying a long-term product like solar, it's a good marriage. I mean, a lot of you might have heard of a 50-year or lifetime warranty on asphalt shingle. I can guarantee you those things are going to last a lifetime. So something to think about. There's still a lot of questions coming in. What are the various financing options we can offer the homeowner? So there's a lot of options. My suggestion is if you reach out to us after this, send us an email, or we can even publish it. There's loan programs, there's lease programs, there's PPA programs, there's PACE funding programs. So depending on what state you're in, depending on what the need is, there's probably a financing option available for you. And again, a lot of the financing option can be, there's a variety of different offerings even within that. There's a 650 FICO score product, there's a 600 FICO score product. There's a product that looks at DTI. There's products that don't care what your DTI is. There's products that look at a waterfall, credit score, right? So there's a lot of different options today, which is why solar is so widely adopted across the US. So another question, how important is the metal roof system in terms of building a net zero home? It relates itself to, the recyclability, right? It relates to the energy footprint of the home. So given a choice between asphalt shingle and, obviously metal would be the choice long-term. Most net zero homes are designed for long-term standing, not like a stick frame construction, right? ICF, for example, which is what we're beginning to use in our net zero homes, is insulated concrete forms filled with concrete. These houses will stick around for 100, 150 years. So if you're going to put a 25-year roof on a 100-year home, it doesn't quite, gel, right? So at that point, you want a long-term roof for a long-term standing home. And you roll that into the cost of construction, right? Your cost of capital today at 3%, 4%, whatever your interest rates are, lends itself pretty well to leveraging a product that's going to be around, 25 years, basically, or 50 years, or 100 years. You basically just look at, what that levelized cost is on a monthly payment in a mortgage. So it's actually a good time to do it. What's the industry efficiency for solar panels, and what is your product's average efficiency? So we're technology agnostic. So Suntuity Group as a company, we've deployed everything from thin film to really high efficiency monocrystalline. Most of the components used in solar PV today are made out of silicon. Theoretical efficiency of silicon in the lab is 28%. Most high efficiency modules today are about 25.5%. So we're so close to the theoretical efficiency of silicon that there isn't much room on the silicon side. And the reason why we're using silicon is it's inert. Tomorrow you have a fire in your house and your panels burn down, it's silicon. There's no harmful effects to groundwater contamination or any of the stuff that's going on, with some of the other, exotic components that are out there. Now, there's a lot of components that people are working on as a workaround or as a efficiency gain to silicon. But just from a commercial application perspective, there's still ways out. They're 6 to 8 years out before it's commercially viable, both from a price perspective and adoptability perspective. So for now, we're pretty close. We're almost at 85% or 90% of the efficiency gains you can have on a product class that, frankly, is safe for the environment, safe for your home. Hospitals have it installed. There's really no issues around this. Another question: I live in Florida and was shocked by how many more solar panel fields I saw in Mass. Can you talk about that? Why is the sunshine state so behind? That's a good question, right? So Florida has some of the highest, sunshine factors in the country, but also has some of the lowest utility costs, right? If you look at Massachusetts, you might be paying 24 cents per kilowatt hour for power. You go to FPNL territory in South Florida and you're paying 6 cents. So when you're looking at the economics of solar and you're looking at incentives, and that's the reason why Massachusetts came up with incentives, because the cost of energy is so high. So as a way to subsidize the cost of energy, they came up with SREC programs, came up with rebate programs. And a lot of this is economics. It's the same reason why your adoption of solar in, emerging countries in Africa and the Caribbean is not widespread. They're burning diesel using generators today, right? You would think solar would be beneficial, of course, out there. A lot of that has to do with red tape and things like that. But it comes down to basic economics, right? If it makes sound sense financially, people will do it, which is why you have adoption in northern states much, much faster than the southern states. But you're also now looking at Texas, right, where you had, the ice storm in the past, where now people are, they don't want to go through that again, and they want batteries. So if you want batteries, you need to have some way of charging the batteries that's just cost effective, which is perfect, your marriage for solar to come in, right? So that's why you have more adoption in northern states than you do at places like Florida. What's the average yearly maintenance cost to install solar on the roof, or it's maintenance free? So anyone that tells you anything is maintenance free is lying to you, right? It's what I would say is the cost to maintain a solar system is minimal, right? If it is a lease or a PPA, you don't have to, because it's owned by an investor. You're basically buying power. It's fully insured by the investor. It's maintained by the investor. But if you are a homeowner and you own your system, depending on what state you are in, the real maintenance is going to be in cleaning, right? And occasionally you'll have certain components fail, but a lot of these components that typically would fail are under warranty. So the maintenance aspects of that are minimal. Now, in the past, you would have certain inverters that had, screens in there and the filters that had to get cleaned once a year. Most of what we deploy now is solid state components with microinverters, where there's really no moving parts, there's no fans in them, right? There's basically thermal backplates that actually expand the heat. So really you don't have to maintain them anymore, which is why you want to marry that to a component like a metal roof that you don't have to maintain. Because even with asphalt shingles will be good for the first 8-10 years, where it's maintenance free for all practical purposes, but eventually you're going to have a leak somewhere. You're going to have a seam somewhere that's going to give, you're going to have problems around that. You don't see as much of that in metal roof. It's more about install once and forget it for a while, which is really what you see on the solar side of it. Is there a rough SF budget number for material installation for the solar system scope of work only for a commercial building? So I'm trying to understand the question. Yeah, so it comes down to price per square. I think that's really what you're alluding to. And again, the price per square is going to be dependent on the types of components you're deploying, right? Again, we look at it as a price per watt. We look at it as how many watts you can install in a square foot, right? So if I had to just do some mental math, I mean, we're today at about 18 watts, per square foot, right? And if I'm on a commercial system, maybe at $2 a watt, I'm at, 36, dollars per square foot. Multiply that by 100. That gives you some understanding of pricing per square, right? Can you explain net positive construction? Sure. So net positive, and I'll give you a perfect example where, one of the projects that we're working on that it's not yet deployed fully, but if you're generating more power than you're consuming, and you're able to export that power or store that power and export that or use it as you want to, that's net positive, right? So one of the applications we're working on right now is we're looking at using insulated pools, where the whole pool is insulated. And then you're looking at using a PV thermal backplate behind a PV panel, where now the PV panel, the electric panel is actually running cooler because the glycol in the thermal plate is actually taking the heat away from the PV panel, and in fact increases the efficiency of the PV panel. But now the hot water from the roof is stored in the pool. So in winter, your pool temperature is going to be about 20 or 25 degrees or 30 degrees higher than the ambient air temperature because it's insulated. And now you use that for preheating your water or your systems in the house for hydronics. So you're now using preheating from the pool, which is acting as a thermal storage unit, from the heat that's deriving from the panels on the roof. And now you can take that and you can export that if you want to. All the extra power that's produced on the PV electric side now become an export mechanism because you're now reducing your footprint on the thermal side. So that's just one of the examples of a net positive solution. But again, in the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see laws around adoption of net positive because the economy is ready for it, the feds are ready for it, and states want it, where you now have some level of resilience in the grid using your home to supply power to the neighborhood in case something happens to the grid. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So that's going to happen. So that being said, I think we made really good time out here. I think this was a really good interactive session, really good question that came out of it. I'll request the moderators to share our contact information after this with the participants. And and of course, I'll turn it, you see your screen. Actually, I'll stop sharing out here. I think it's already stopped sharing. But you do have, I think you received one AIA LU learning credits because you participated in this. And if this is something that helped you guys and you think this was beneficial, we'd love to come back and have a follow-up presentation where we can dive into more details going forward. So that being said, no more questions. Thank you all, and have a good holidays for those of you that we don't talk to before that. Thank you.